Good morning. This is a very special interview here on WBMC, and you're behind the mic with Chad Graves. We're bringing you some breaking, confirmed news today, and you heard it here first, straight from the source. While there's been a lot of talk and speculation out there, we focus on facts, not rumors. And joining us now is Congressman Scott DesJarlais with an important update for the veterans here in McMinnville. Congressman, thank you so very much for being with us today.
Well, it's a great day to be with you because the last time you and I talked about 6 to 8 weeks ago, the news was not so good. And
That's right.
I think I told you at that time that we were not going to let this go. We are going to fight it all the way. And I didn't want to come on with excuses. I wanted to come on with solutions. And we probably had, I probably talked to Secretary Collins of the VA at least 5 or 6 times. My staff has had conference calls with them several times a week since we last spoke, and it's been quite a push. But we let the concerns of our veterans be known. There was multiple clinics across the country that were closed, a couple in Georgia, a couple in other states, and so I don't know exactly what the driving force was, but I told Secretary Collins that there wasn't an easy solution for our veterans in Warren County going to Cookeville and actually going to Tullahoma, which does not have a lot of active duty people. It's not really the best solution. And this clinic I think opened in 2010, and so anyways. We heard the call of the veterans, and so we kept pushing and fighting for this. And we certainly had help from my Tennessee colleagues and Mayor Terry Bell. It's been a team effort, to make this happen. But just with persistence and explaining the situation that had been created by this, Secretary Collins was very helpful. I give he and his team a lot of credit for paying attention to us and our concerns. And so at the end of the day, it's great to be on with you and be able to share good news that not only is the clinic going to be open, but it's going to be better, because there were complaints of the level of care not always being what it should be. That was one of the reasons apparently for the closure. Not to criticize anybody who works there. Sometimes it's staffing issues. There's always reasons that sometimes things aren't as good as they should be. But Secretary Collins feels with what the VA crew that are going to be bringing in to this clinic is going to provide even better care for our veterans, not to mention keeping it right there in Warren County.
So the press release that I read mentions a lot of behind-the-scenes effort. So can you tell us about some of those conversations and who have you been talking with?
Yeah, well, the minute we heard that it was being closed, it was a shock to all of us because it was not announced to anyone in the delegation, specifically me, the local politicians. And, so I called Secretary Collins and I said, hey, it would have been nice to have a heads up on something like this. And he apologized immediately. He said, you're right. This was not handled correctly. You should have known that this was going to happen. And so I said, well, that's all great, but let's see how we can get this resolved. And so my team, my military LA, my chief of staff and other people in here set up conference calls with his team. And so they did many Zoom calls, and we reached out to our senators and other representatives in the area to give us backup and say, we can't have this happening in Tennessee. And the secretary and I served together for about 8 years here in Congress. So, I considered him a friend, and I said, Doug, this just isn't going to fly. You got to find a way to help us. And he said, yeah, you're right. I'm going to do everything I can to rectify this and kind of explain, what was going on and why it was happening. And so it was a lot of pushing. And in the end, we knew about a week ago that we were going to get this good news. They'd given us a heads up, but I didn't want to come out until it was a slam dunk. But, as of this morning, they said the McMinnville Clinic will not be closing. And again, that we hope that the quality of care improves. And so I'm excited. I know there's been several meetings with the veterans groups there. I always made sure to have staff there to listen to their concerns. And in the end, it looks like we have a good outcome. So we're very grateful for everybody's team effort in making this happen.
Well, that's outstanding. So there's been a lot of conversation in this community over the past couple of months talking about the closure of this or the potential closure, the non-closure now of this clinic. What do you want the veterans and families to understand about the work that was happening, even when it wasn't public?
Well, obviously, being in the political arena, we take a lot of heat when something like this happens. And I serve on the Armed Services Committee, and so our veterans and our active duty military are first and foremost. I have a son that's flying the C-130. He was Naval Academy grad and went through TBS. So he's a Marine, and he just got his certification to fly the C-130. And I had to do a little fatherly plug there, but proud of him and all the people that step up and serve. And so that's probably what I spend 70% of my time on here in DC is our military, our veterans, and making sure that they have the best equipment and that they get the best services they can. My first job as a physician was at a VA hospital in South Dakota. My mother was a VA nurse for 44 years, and so it's kind of in the family. And mom, who passed away in July, even worked on what they call the lock ward and had to deal with patients that were very sick and PTSD. And I remember one time she got beat up pretty badly, and she said it's not his fault, it's because we were all kids and we were angry that she came home all bruised. And mom would not criticize the veterans because they were going through the trauma that they had seen on the battlefield, and she would not be critical of them, despite you don't want to see your mom hurt, but that's the way she was. So for 44 years she served at the Fort Meade VA hospital there in the Black Hills, and again, that's where I was. And when I moved to Tennessee in '93, I made sure that my practice accepted TRICARE, and I took care of a lot of veterans there right in the Marion County area. And I'm not to go off on a tangent, but I have one story that I'd like to share. My mom was in town visiting, and my nurse was out that day. And of course, she's an RN, so she came in and said she'd be my nurse. I'll never ask her again. But she was so thorough. I mean, her notes is like 2 pages of notes. But we had a veteran from World War II that was a paratrooper and had a jump over German territory. And when he hit, I don't know, I think he got shot on the way down, but he hit the ground. His chute didn't collapse, and it was dragging him through a frozen field. There was a German soldier running along trying to shoot him, shot up his leg. He had it amputated. And when she was visiting with him in my exam room, she said, well, I assume you're 100% Service Connect. And he was not, for some reason. I'll tell you this, by the time he left my clinic that day and mom made a couple phone calls, he was 100% Service Connect. And so, just very grateful to our veterans, and we will stand by them and make sure that they get what, we promised, because they gave so much for our country.
Well, you took a little criticism from people here in Warren County, but I understand that this situation is near and dear to your heart, and you did work behind the scenes to keep this open because you thought it was an important issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly it is, and we'd like to be able to do that. There's we opened a clinic in Columbia over in Murray County while I was in office, and if they're going to be trying to close these clinics, we're going to have to keep fighting and be vigilant. This may not end here. We will continue to push in the upcoming years, but I think once they get a VA staff in here and they prove the quality of care, hopefully this is a long-term permanent thing, and if it's not, we'll fight it again.
So you mentioned the improving the quality care. What are there any specifics that you can share?
Well, sometimes when you have non-VA contracted people that are running these clinics, I'm not criticizing them. I don't know anything about what the volume was or whether they had staffing issues, but apparently there were a lot of complaints, according to the VA secretary, about this particular clinic. And I don't know what the exact number was, but it was concerning to them that the standards had not been met. I think this particular group, and I hope I'm not stepping on any toes here, had received some warnings that they needed to improve some metrics in the clinic. And when that didn't happen, I guess they were chosen as one to close. And I'm sure whoever's running the clinic. Well, I know who's running, but I don't mean to offend them, but apparently, that was an issue. And so by bringing in VA staffing, there will be different standards that Secretary Collins feels will be in place, and be more accountable. So I don't know what the reason was for what was called, maybe not meeting the full standards that the VA expected. But he's confident that the new staffing that will be brought in place will serve the veterans better.
So, Congressman, before we let you go, this is obviously a very big win for McMinnville and Warren County. What keeps you motivated to keep pushing for communities like this?
Well, that's my job. That's why people elect me is to take care of people. They think that we just come to Washington and vote. There's so much casework that goes on, whether it's in the Murfreesboro office or the Winchester office. There's people with Social Security issues. There's veteran issues. There's when I was a physician, when you were on call, and you expected to get called. When you're in Congress, your phone and your emails don't stop. It's 24/7. And for some reason, people know that Sunday morning or Saturday night or whatever is a good time to reach out to me. So, it's a nonstop thing. And yeah, we vote, but the amount of time that we spend on, any broad range of issues from agriculture to energy to foreign affairs, military, of course, being the Strategic Forces Subcommittee Chair. I have Golden Dome, everything space, missile defense, drones. And so we spend a lot of time in a skiff trying to make sure that America is the best military, which we are, but we want to keep it that way. We know China's a threat. The president has just spent a couple of days over there. Hopefully he made some good progress there. But, it's a job where we serve, I think, in our county, and I don't know what it's going to be now, but over 800,000 people. So you're getting, calls, letters, and it's a very broad spectrum of work that we do. But when you can do things for a specific community in your district like this, it's really rewarding when, you are able to help people. There are some meat processing plants that were being abused by a certain USDA inspector. We're able to get him removed. And so, there's darn few processors around the district that still do USDA processing of beef. If you have somebody that, wants to sell you cattle locally, where do you take it to be processed? So, all the big companies want to, squash the little companies. And so we were able to, for example, get the kind of a bad actor out of the USDA inspection process. So we just go county to county. We've been able to do a lot for MTSU, and I just encourage people to reach out to our office because that's our job, and we love to help the people of the 4th District.
Well, so when can folks expect to see you back here in Warren County talking with our veterans face to face?
We're going to be there soon, and I've got a military trip coming up in the next week. But I want to get there as soon as I can to talk to them one-on-one and answer any questions that they may have. So I would like to think that will be within the next month. Our congressional calendar is really tight right now through June and July. And so there's not as many windows as people think. They think we're on recess or on vacations, but when we're home, it doesn't feel like I'm on a playground. I'm in Huntsville a lot, at Redstone Arsenal, and there's places with Arnold Air Force Base and whatnot that tie to my committee work, not to mention Farm Bureau and others. And so when you are home, you're visiting a lot of businesses, factories, and whatnot. So I wish there was more time on the schedule, to get out and interact, but it's really been a busy year and probably one of the most interesting years, both legislatively and for a number of other reasons since I've served in Congress. But I plan on being in McMinnville as soon as possible.
Well, we would like to extend the invitation for you to come here to the studio and sit down with us and talk in detail about all the things that are going on there in Washington. I understand you're in Washington right now.
I'm in Washington now, and we've had a Army budget hearing this morning that's still going on. I'm going to have to run back to that here in a minute. But thanks for having me on, and it's great to be able to deliver good news to our veterans. And again, Mayor Terry Bell and all the others in the Tennessee delegation and everybody who worked to make this happen. Thank you to our veterans for, making their voices heard. They were not ignored, and just blessed to have a great outcome.
Well, Congressman, thank you so very much for taking the time to work on this in the background and to bring us this great news to Warren County. And folks, you've heard it here first on WBMC and Behind the Mic. And again, thank you again, Congressman, about this great news and for talking to us today.
Oh, Chad, thank you for having me on.
Well, love to see you in the studio sometime soon. So thank you again. All right. You've been listening to Behind the Mic on WBMC. Thank you, Congressman.